Old woman, hand me your $5 house. That's what my son-in-law Mark said to me. Not whispered, not behind closed doors. No, he said it loud enough for everyone sitting in my own living room to hear, loud enough that even my neighbor who had come over with a bowl of potato salad froze in the doorway, her spoon still midair. My chest tightened as if I'd just been shoved backward. My hands were still dusted with flour. I had been making biscuits for the family dinner, and suddenly the room didn't smell like butter or yeast anymore. It smelled like humiliation. Mark stood there in his polished shoes, the kind that never touched dirt, with that little smirk stretched across his face. He had one arm draped over the back of the sofa as if he already owned the place. My daughter, Claire, was beside him, silent eyes fixed on the floor. "You heard me," he said again, louder this time. "It's worth $5 million, give or take. Zillow says so anyway. You don't need it. You're 73. What you need is a small condo, something easier to manage. This house is wasted on you." The words cut me open. I wanted to answer, but my throat felt like sand. All I managed was a whisper. "Excuse me," Mark chuckled, that deep, arrogant laugh of his. "Don't play dumb, Linda. Sign the deed over to Claire and me. Tonight, we'll even let you stay in the guest room until we figure out where to put you. Isn't that generous?" Gasps rippled through the room. My granddaughter Emily, only 16, stood up so fast her chair screeched against the hardwood. "You can't talk to Grandma like that," she shouted, her voice trembling, but fierce. "Sit down," Claire hissed, yanking her daughter's arm. "This is family business, family business." That's what they called stripping me of the very home I'd built with my late husband, the place we bought for $120,000 back in 1979 when money was tight, when he worked double shifts at the steel plant, and I took in sewing jobs from neighbors just to keep the mortgage paid. Now that same house sat in a booming Cleveland neighborhood worth more than $5 million, and suddenly, to them, I was just a roadblock to cash. I stared at the framed photos on the mantel, my husband in his work boots, my kids with scraped knees on the front porch, Christmas mornings where the tree nearly touched the ceiling. Memories stacked higher than any pile of money, and yet here I was, being told I was too old to deserve it. Mark leaned forward, lowering his voice like a wolf closing in. "Do the smart thing, Linda. Don't drag this out. You're fragile. You don't need the stress. Just sign the papers." Fragile. That word burned worse than any insult. My hands might tremble when I pour coffee, but I had carried babies through fevers held. My husband's hand through cancer worked myself sore to keep food on the table. Fragile number, worn maybe, scarred yes, but fragile never. Still in that moment, I felt cornered. My son had died years ago. Claire was all I had left. And now she stood there, letting her husband spit on my dignity. I heard whispers among the relatives gathered. Someone muttered, "It's not right." Another said, "She's too old to fight them." That was when I felt every eye on me, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to hand over the deed, just to keep the peace. Instead, I pressed my palms flat on the flour-dusted table and forced myself to meet Mark's gaze. My voice cracked, but I said it anyway. "Why now? Why tonight?" His grin widened. "Because the sooner we have it, the sooner we can start flipping it. Developers are hungry. We could get $7 million if we play it right. And frankly, I'm tired of waiting for you to, keel over. Might as well make it official." The room went dead silent. Even Claire flinched. I thought of my husband's last words to me, whispered in this very living room as he lay dying. "Take care of the house. It's ours. Don't let anyone push you out." And now his own son-in-law had the gall to call me an old woman and demand the deed like it was a box of cookies he could just snatch off the counter. I glanced at Emily. Her fists clenched, her jaw tight. She was the only one who looked ready to fight for me. A teenager. My blood. And suddenly, deep inside, I felt something stir, not weakness, not fear, something else. I didn't show it. Not yet. I just nodded slowly and whispered, "All right. If that's what you want." The room erupted in murmurs. Mark's smirk turned into a triumphant grin. Claire exhaled as if a weight had lifted. They thought I had given up. They thought they had won. But let me tell you something right now. I may have looked beaten that night, sitting in my flour-dusted apron, hands trembling, but I was already thinking ahead. Because I would give him that house. but Mark would never ever live in it. My name is Linda Parker, 73 years old, widow, mother, grandmother, seamstress by trade, survivor by necessity. When Mark threw those words at me, "Old woman, hand me your $5 house," I knew he wasn't just talking about property, he was talking about my life. Because this house wasn't simply brick and wood, it was blood, sweat, nights of hunger, mornings of hope. I wasn't born into money. My father worked as a janitor at the Ford plant until his lungs gave out. My mother cleaned houses. I was the oldest of 5, the one who mended hand-me-down clothes until the fabric was more patch than original. I married young to James Parker, a steel worker with rough hands and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. We bought this house in 1979 for $120,000. That number felt impossible back then. James worked double shifts sometimes, coming home so tired he'd fall asleep at the kitchen table with his boots still on. I took in sewing jobs, hemming prom dresses, patching jeans, making curtains for neighbors. Every penny went to the mortgage. We ate beans and rice more nights than I can count, but somehow we made the payments. James used to say, "One day this house will be worth something, Linda. It'll protect us, protect the kids." He was right. Property values in Cleveland climbed sky high over the decades. By the time he passed cancer after 40 years of marriage, the house was valued at $5 million. He never got to see that. But I remember the night before he died, he pulled my hand close and whispered, "Promise me, don't let them push you out. This house is your armor. It's your dignity." I promised. And I kept that promise at least until my daughter Claire married Mark. Claire wasn't always like this. She was my bright, beautiful girl. I remember her 8th birthday when she begged for a dollhouse we couldn't afford. I stayed up nights sewing tiny curtains out of scraps, painting cardboard walls, so she'd have something special. She squealed when she saw it, hugged me, and said, "Best mom ever." What happened to that little girl? Somewhere along the way, she traded love for luxury. Mark had money in his eyes from the first day he shook my hand. He's the type who reads Forbes but never helps carry groceries. Claire followed him step by step until suddenly I was no longer mom. I was just an obstacle between them and a 5M enterprise. Do you want to know the truth? I wasn't angry at first. I was heartbroken. Because this wasn't just about a house. It was about respect. About how easily your own children can forget the sacrifices that built their world. When James and I scraped every penny to pay tuition when I worked nights at the nursing home to cover Claire's college bills, did I ever complain? Never. I ironed her graduation gown myself, tears dripping onto the fabric, thinking, she'll go far. She'll be better than me. And now that same daughter stood silent while her husband called me old woman and demanded the deed. I know some of you listening might understand. Maybe you felt it too, that knife twist, when the ones you raised, the ones you fed and clothed, look at you as if you're useless, as if you're a burden, as if your value begins and ends with what you can hand over. But let me tell you, behind every wrinkle on my face, there's a story. Behind every scar on these hands, there's proof I fought for my family. I may look small, hunched, easy to ignore, but inside I carry decades of fire. This isn't just my house. It's my husband's sweat, my children's laughter, my own backbone laid into every wall. And I wasn't about to surrender it, not to Mark, not to anyone. Still, that night, I played along. I let him think he'd won. Because I know something Mark will never understand: patience. He sees only money. I see time, decades, promises made and kept, secrets tucked away for the right moment. As I sat at that table, flour dust still on my apron, I remembered one more thing James told me long ago. It was during a winter storm, pipes frozen roof, leaking bills piling high. I was crying, thinking we'd lose the house back then. He took my chin in his rough hand and said, "Linda, you're tougher than you look. Don't forget that. The world will try to break you, but you've got steel in your spine. Steel in my spine." That's what kept me from collapsing when Mark spat those words at me. That's what kept me sitting tall when Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. That's what made me notice Emily, my granddaughter, clenching her fists in silent fury. Because maybe Claire had forgotten. Maybe Mark never knew. But Emily, she was still watching, still learning, and I wasn't about to let her believe that power belonged only to the cruel, so I kept quiet. I let them celebrate too soon, and inside I whispered to myself, James, don't worry. I won't break. Not now. Not ever. The next Sunday, Claire invited everyone to dinner. Not here in my home, the 5-meter house that Mark already thought belonged to him, but at a restaurant on Main Street called Miller's Diner. I knew something was off the moment we walked in. The whole family was there, Claire, Mark, their friends, even Mark's parents, who never bothered to see me otherwise. The place smelled of fried chicken and coffee, neon lights buzzing overhead booths packed with strangers, who turned to look when we entered. Mark stood at the head of the long table like he was hosting a banquet. He waved me toward a seat at the far end. Sit there, Linda, near the wall. It was subtle, but it stung. My husband used to sit at the head of every table. He believed respect began with where you placed your elders, and now I was shoved into the corner like a child. Emily tried to sit beside me, but Claire snapped, No, sweetie, over here by us. She pulled her daughter away, leaving me isolated. The waitress came refilling water glasses. I noticed how her eyebrows arched when she heard Mark's booming voice. So everyone, let's get down to business. He raised his glass of Coke as if it were champagne. Claire and I have some news. I braced myself. Mark smiled, wide teeth gleaming under the fluorescent lights. We'll soon be the official owners of Mom's house, a $5 million property. Can you believe it? Finally, we'll be able to put it to real use. Gasps, murmurs, nods. His mother clapped politely. His father grunted something like approval. The words hit me like a slap. They hadn't even asked. They hadn't waited. They were announcing my house as theirs, like a prize they'd already collected. I tried to speak, but Mark cut me off. Linda, don't be shy. Tell them how you agreed, right? Tell everyone how you're doing the smart thing. The entire diner seemed to freeze. A man in a red flannel shirt 2 booths down set down his fork, staring. An older woman at the counter whispered, Is she serious? I swallowed hard, my lips trembling. Before I could answer, Claire leaned forward, her voice dripping with sugar, but sharp underneath. It's for the best, Mom. You can't handle that big house anymore, the bills, the repairs. It's too much for you. Mark laughed. She can barely pour herself a cup of coffee without spilling it. Isn't that right, Linda? The table erupted in chuckles. Not everyone laughed, but enough to make my face burn. My cheeks felt like fire. Emily slammed her hand on the table. Stop it! She's not useless, Emily. Claire hissed, yanking her daughter's wrist. Sit down. Mark leaned back, smug as ever. See? Even the kid knows it's true. My throat closed up. I looked around, faces of relatives, strangers in nearby booths, waitresses trying to act busy but listening to every word. My humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was public. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about paperwork or signatures. This was about power. Mark wanted me small, broken, humiliated in front of witnesses. He wanted to prove that I was nothing. I thought of James again. He would have flipped this table over rather than let anyone speak to me that way. But James was gone. It was just me, now an old woman in a corner booth with a family that treated me like trash. I clenched my hands under the table nails, digging into my palms. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. The waitress came back, her eyes flicking to me, her mouth tightening. She set down a plate of meatloaf in front of me and whispered, You don't deserve this. It was quiet, just for me, but it was enough. Someone saw. Someone knew. I lifted my fork, forcing myself to eat, while laughter echoed down the table. Every bite tasted like ash. Mark raised his glass again. To new beginnings, to the house. Everyone clinked glasses. Claire leaned in, eyes cold. Don't embarrass us, Mom. Just go along with it. I didn't answer. I chewed, I swallowed, and I let them think they'd broken me. But inside the fire grew hotter, because they weren't just taking my house. They were erasing me. And if they wanted war, well, I had lived through worse. Why are you even sitting here? Linda Mark's voice cut through the clatter of plates and chatter of Miller's Diner. Heads turned. Forks hovered midair. You don't belong at this table anymore, he continued, leaning back in his chair like a king addressing a servant. This is our celebration, our house, our future. You're just dead weight. A hush swept across the long table. Claire sipped her iced tea, eyes fixed on the straw as if pretending not to hear. I felt my chest burn. "Dead weight," I whispered. Mark smirked. "That's what you are. A parasite. You sit in that house rattling around like a ghost while the rest of us could be turning it into something real. You've had your time. Now it's ours." The words landed like stones. Across the diner, someone coughed awkwardly. A teenager in the next booth craned his neck to watch. I forced my hands flat on the table to stop them from trembling. That house is my home. I built my life there. Mark laughed so loudly that the entire diner heard. "Built your life. Please, you sewed dresses and baked biscuits. You didn't build anything. James worked himself into the ground for that place. Not you. And now he's gone, which means you're squatting in property that should belong to us." Gasps. My ears rang. He hadn't just disrespected me, he had spat on my husband's memory. Emily jumped to her feet. "Don't you dare talk about Grandpa like that." "Sit down," Claire hissed, grabbing her arm again. But this time Emily jerked free, her cheeks red with fury. "No, you can't treat her like this. She's not useless." Mark's face hardened. "Watch your mouth, young lady. You don't know what's best for anyone. Your mother and I do." Emily glared at him. "All I know is you're a bully." The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. People weren't eating anymore, they were listening. Even the waitress stopped mid-pour with the coffee pot. Mark straightened his smirk, returning. "A bully, no. A realist. Someone has to tell the truth. Look at her." He pointed directly at me, his finger stabbing the air. "She can't even keep up with her own bills. She can barely walk up the stairs without clutching the railing. What happens when she falls? Who pays the hospital bills? Then us. That's who. So yes, it's time she signed over the deed and stopped pretending she matters." My breath caught. Pretending I mattered? Claire finally looked at me, her voice cool. "Mom, it's not about disrespect, it's about practicality. You've outlived your usefulness. You should be grateful we're offering to take care of everything for you. Outlived my usefulness." The words echoed in my head, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the nervous whispers spreading across the diner. A man in a red flannel 2 booths down slammed his hand on the counter. "Hey, you don't talk to your mother like that." Every eye swung toward him. He looked about 60, maybe a retired construction worker, his hands calloused, his face lined with hard years. "I don't know this lady," he said, nodding toward me, "but I know respect, and you two ain't got it," Mark sneered. "Mind your own business, old man." The man stood towering over the booth. "It is my business when I see a daughter and son-in-law treating their mother like garbage. Shame on you." Whispers erupted around the diner. Heads nodded. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Another said, "Poor woman." Claire's cheeks flushed crimson. Mark waved dismissively. "These strangers don't matter. They don't know the situation." But they did matter. They were witnesses. They saw me being stripped not of property, but of dignity. I swallowed my throat raw. "I mattered when I paid your tuition, Claire. I mattered when I stayed up sewing your wedding dress because you couldn't afford the designer one. I mattered when James and I sacrificed so you could have everything we didn't. And now you stand here and call me useless." Claire's eyes flickered. For a moment I thought I saw guilt. But then she looked at Mark and it vanished. Mark smirked, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "You mattered then, sure. But not anymore. Your time is done. This is our world now. So do us all a favor, sign the house over, and stop pretending you're anything more than a burden." The diner erupted not in cheers, but in outrage. Murmurs grew louder. A woman at the counter shook her head, muttering, "Disgusting." Emily stood taller, her voice breaking but clear. "Grandma's not a burden. She's the only reason we even have that house. You're the burden, Mark." My heart ached with pride. Mark slammed his fist on the table, silverware rattling. "Enough, I'm done pretending. Linda, you're finished. The house is ours, and everyone here can watch you admit it." Every eye burned into me. The humiliation was complete, my own daughter and son-in-law parading me as worthless in front of family and strangers alike. But deep inside, I wasn't broken. I was burning. Because if they wanted me small, if they wanted me silent, they had chosen the wrong woman. The diner meeting didn't end with words. 2 days later, Claire and Mark came to my house unannounced. No knocking, no calling ahead, just the sound of the front door opening with Claire's spare key. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the heavy thud of their footsteps across the hardwood floor. Mom Claire called her voice sharp, "We need to talk." Mark followed behind her, holding a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the kitchen table with a loud slap. "This is the paperwork, the deed transfer. It's all prepared. You just need to sign." I stared at it, steam curling from my mug. "You didn't even ask." "We don't need to ask," Mark said smoothly. "You already agreed at dinner." I never agreed. His smile was all teeth. "You nodded. Everyone saw it." Claire sat down across from me, her eyes tired but determined. "Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. We've already lined up a buyer. The realtor's coming next week to appraise. We'll be in escrow within a month if you just cooperate." Appraise, buyer, escrow. The words felt like knives. They weren't just humiliating me anymore, they were dismantling my life in real time. "You're selling my home," I whispered. "Our home," Claire corrected. "Ours now." I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so hard the tea rippled in the cup. "Where am I supposed to go?" Mark leaned forward, his cologne stinging my nose. "We've thought about that. A retirement complex off Maple Street. Small rooms, lots of nurses. Perfect for someone like you, someone like me." Images flashed through my mind, tiny beige rooms, the smell of disinfectant, a TV blaring in the background while I sat forgotten in a corner. My skin crawled. "No," I said barely more than a whisper. Mark chuckled. "Linda, this is happening whether you like it or not. You're too old to live here alone. And frankly, you're not capable. Do you want to know how I know that?" He pulled a set of keys from his pocket, my house keys. My chest seized. "Where did you get those?" He dangled them in the air. "Claire made copies. We figured it was safer if we had control. You don't need them anymore." The betrayal was like ice water down my back. Claire couldn't even meet my eyes. "You stole my keys," I whispered. "We didn't steal anything," Claire said quickly. "We're protecting you. This is for your own good, for my own good." My voice rose, breaking into a tremble. "Throwing me out of the home your father built with his bare hands, that's for my good." Claire flinched, but Mark was unmoved. He spread the papers across the table, tapping where I was supposed to sign. "It's simple. Sign here, and all of this nonsense is over. We'll handle the money. You won't have to worry about a thing." My hands curled into fists. "It's not nonsense. It's my life." Emily appeared in the doorway then. She'd come home from school early, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. She froze when she saw the papers. "What's going on?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about," Claire said quickly. Mark turned with that fake smile. "Grandma's signing over the house. It's for the best." Emily dropped her backpack with a thud. "No, she's not, Emily," Claire snapped. "Stay out of this." But Emily didn't back down. She marched to the table, her small hands snatching the keys from Mark's grasp before he realized what she was doing. "These aren't yours," she shouted. Mark's face twisted with anger. "Give those back." "No." Emily clutched them to her chest. "This is Grandma's house. You can't just take it." "Emily." Claire's voice cracked, half fury, half panic. "Do as you're told." But Emily shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "Why are you doing this to her? After everything she's done for us. She's not useless. She's family." The room shook with silence. For the first time, Mark's smile faltered. He glanced at Claire, expecting her to shut her daughter down. But Claire just sat there, lips pressed tight, hands trembling against the table. "Emily," I whispered, my throat aching. She looked at me, her eyes wet but blazing. "Don't sign it, Grandma. Please." I reached across the table, laying my hand gently over hers. "I won't." Mark slammed his fist against the table, making the papers scatter. "Enough. This is happening. You can either sign willingly or we'll take it through court. You think any judge is going to side with a frail old woman over a young family trying to provide? Don't be naive." His words struck like thunder. Court, judges, lawyers. I felt my world tilting, like the ground beneath me was cracking open. But then I remembered James's voice. "Don't let them push you out. The house is your armor. Armor. That word rang in my ears. I looked at Mark's red face, at Claire's shaking hands, at Emily's tears. And I realized they thought they'd already won. They thought I had nothing left. I let my shoulders slump, my voice quiet. "Fine," I said. Claire exhaled in relief. Mark smirked. "Good, finally." I reached for the pen slowly, deliberately. My hand hovered over the page. And in that moment, I made a vow to myself I would let them think they had beaten me. I would let them celebrate. But I would never, ever let this house go. Not to Mark, not to Claire, not to anyone. That night, after Mark and Claire stormed out, the house fell silent. Only the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway filled the space. Emily sat with me at the kitchen table, her small hand still wrapped around mine, refusing to let go. "Grandma," she whispered, "they can't do this to you. They just can't." I squeezed her fingers gently. "They think they can, but they don't know me as well as they think." When she finally went upstairs, I stayed alone in the kitchen, staring at the papers still scattered across the table. The words blurred together: transfer of ownership, escrow buyer-seller. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. Instead, I let the silence carry me backward into memories I hadn't visited in years. I remembered the winter of 1982 when the furnace broke and we couldn't afford the repair. James and I huddled the kids into the living room, set up sleeping bags by the fireplace, and burned chopped wood for weeks until our tax refund came. The kids thought it was an adventure. But I remembered James's hands blistered from the axe, his breath fogging in the cold, his voice telling me, "Don't worry, Linda. We'll make it. We always made it." I remembered nights at the sewing machine, the hum of the needle piercing fabric, while the rest of the neighborhood slept. My fingers bled through thimbles, my back ached, but I kept stitching curtains, dresses, prom gowns, even wedding veils for girls whose families couldn't afford the boutique prices. They paid me $20 here, $50 there, enough to keep the lights on, enough to buy shoes for Claire when hers had holes. Claire never knew. She never saw me slip out at dawn to deliver finished pieces. She never knew how many meals I skipped so she could eat. She only saw the dollhouse on her 8th birthday, the college tuition bills stamped, paid, the wedding dress pressed and ready. That's what mothers do. We give until our hands are empty. But as I sat in that kitchen now with the papers demanding my signature, I realized something: they mistook my giving for weakness. They thought because I had sacrificed, I would surrender. They didn't understand that sacrifice is strength. I thought of James again, of the nights he came home with calloused hands and grease under his nails, barely able to stand after a 16-hour shift. "Steel in your spine," he used to tell me. "That's what it takes. Don't let anyone mistake kindness for fragility." Steel, I had carried it all these years, hidden beneath wrinkles and gray hair. And now, maybe, for the first time, I would need to use it. I rose from the table and walked through the house. Each room whispered pieces of my life. The dining room, where Thanksgiving turkeys once roasted golden brown, filling the air with rosemary and garlic. The staircase, where Claire and her brother slid down on pillowcases, giggling so loud the neighbors complained. The living room, where James sat in his recliner every Sunday shouting at the Browns on TV. This house was more than walls. It was a vessel of sacrifice. And I wasn't about to let Mark turn it into a payday. I paused by the mantel, running my fingers over the frame of our wedding photo. James's eyes stared back at me, young, strong, filled with a hope we carried together. "I'll take care of it, James," I whispered. "I promise." And then, almost without meaning to, my eyes drifted to the small drawer beneath the mantel, the one James had kept locked. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside was a box of old files, bank slips, receipts, yellowed envelopes. I pulled one free, the edges crisp, the handwriting unmistakably his. "For Linda. Only when you need it." My heart pounded. I pressed the envelope to my chest, tears welling despite myself. Was this the man's way of reaching across time to protect me? Still, I didn't open it. Not yet. I slid it back into the box. Because for now, all I needed was the reminder James had trusted me. He had believed I was strong enough. I walked upstairs past Emily's closed door, past the room where Claire used to sleep as a girl. And for the first time in days, I smiled, because maybe they thought I was fragile. Maybe they thought I was finished, but they didn't know the truth. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And soon enough, they would learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who has already survived everything life could throw at her. The next morning, the house felt heavier than ever, like the walls themselves knew what had happened. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, but it didn't feel warm. I sat at the table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the manila envelope Mark had left behind. I hadn't touched it. Not once. Emily came downstairs, her backpack slung over her shoulder. She stopped when she saw me still at the table. "Grandma," she said gently, "don't sign it." "I won't," I told her, forcing strength into my voice. "Not now, not ever." She nodded, her eyes fierce for a 16-year-old. Good, because they don't deserve it. Then she left for school, her words lingering like armor around me. When the house was quiet again, I wandered into the living room. My eyes fell on the mantel drawer, the one with James's old papers. My heart tugged at me. I pulled it open again. The box was still there, filled with files and faded envelopes. My hands trembled as I lifted the one marked in his handwriting for Linda. Only when you need it. I carried it back to the kitchen and sat down. My breath quickened. I slid it open with a butter knife and slid out the contents. It wasn't just one letter. It was a stack of papers, bank statements, official seals, notarized signatures. And at the top, a handwritten note in James's steady scrawl, "If anyone ever tries to take the house from you, this will protect you." My eyes darted across the documents. They weren't just random papers. They were legal, detailed, and they told a story. James had refinanced the house years ago quietly and set up a trust, my trust. The deed wasn't just in my name. It was locked inside an irrevocable trust that gave me control until my death, at which point it would pass to whomever I designated. No one, not Claire, not Mark, not even a court could force me to sign it away. My hands shook as I flipped through each page. Every what if James had worried about was covered. He had seen this coming. He had prepared for it. And at the bottom of the stack was something even more startling, a sealed envelope with the words Bank of America, confidential, scrawled across it. Inside was a safety deposit box key. I clutched it, my heart pounding. What on earth had James hidden there? Just then, the phone rang, jolting me. I fumbled for the receiver. Mrs. Parker. It was Mr. Reynolds, our family lawyer. He was in his late 70s now, retired for the most part, but his voice was still steady. "I received a message from James years ago to contact you if anything unusual happened with the house. Are you all right?" My breath caught. How did you know to call today?" "Because he said quietly, your son-in-law called me this morning trying to pressure me to draw up transfer papers. He wanted me to convince you to sign." I refused. But it reminded me of James's instructions. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my pulse racing. James left me documents. A trust. There was a pause. Then Mr. Reynolds' voice warmed. "Then you're protected, Linda. More than they realize. But keep it quiet. Don't let them know what you have. Timing will matter." I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. For the first time in weeks, the fear in my chest loosened. I had something they didn't know about. Something stronger than their bullying. The front door banged open just then. Claire, her voice sharp. "Mom, we need to talk." I shoved the documents back into the envelope and slid it under the cushion of the chair. Mark followed her in, grinning as usual. "Got the papers ready, Linda? The realtor's coming tomorrow. Best to have everything squared away." I forced a smile, calm, collected. "Don't worry. Everything will be ready when the time comes." He smirked, thinking he'd won again. Claire nodded stiffly, but inside my heart was steady for the first time in months. Because now I knew something they didn't. I held the key, literally. And I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for James's promise, for Emily's future, for my own dignity. As they walked through the living room, Mark glanced at the mantel. "We should clear this place out soon, maybe stage it for buyers. Too much old junk." I pressed my lips together, my hand brushing the hidden envelope under the cushion. "Some junk," I murmured under my breath, "is worth more than you'll ever know." From that day forward, I played two roles: the fragile grandmother they thought they'd broken, and the woman quietly sharpening her blade in the dark. Mark strutted through my house like he already owned it. He pointed at the crown molding, muttered about knocking down walls, even called a contractor one afternoon, while I sat on the couch knitting. "Open concept will double the resale," he said into his phone, walking past me, as if I were invisible. "Yeah, 5 million minimum, maybe 7 if we push it." I kept my head down, my hands steady on the yarn, but inside my blood boiled. Every word he spoke was an insult, every laugh a reminder that he thought I was powerless. But I wasn't. At night, when the house was quiet and Emily was asleep, I gathered James's documents. I laid them out on the dining table, legal language, signatures, seals. I studied them by the dim light of the old lamp until my eyes blurred. I might not be a lawyer, but I understood one thing clearly. Mark couldn't touch this house. Not legally. Not now. Not ever. I decided to test it. The next day, I went to the Bank of America downtown, clutching the small safety deposit key James had left behind. My hands trembled as I handed it to the teller. She guided me to a private room where the steel box waited. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were bonds, government bonds worth hundreds of thousands neatly stacked, and another envelope thick and sealed with James's handwriting for Linda and no one else. I didn't open it there. I tucked it into my purse, my heart pounding. James had prepared for everything, and now, piece by piece, I was discovering just how much power he had left me. But I knew I had to be careful. If Mark suspected, he'd grow desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. So I played my part. That Sunday, Claire and Mark hosted another family dinner, this time back at my house. The irony burned, but I smiled through it. Neighbors came, cousins dropped by, even Mark's parents showed up again, eager to gawk at the 5 p.m. future their son was bragging about. I served them roast chicken and mashed potatoes like nothing was wrong. I listened as Mark boasted about selling the property, about moving into a bigger house on the lake, about taking vacations to Europe once the money cleared. Claire laughed along, sipping her wine, pretending not to notice me sitting silently at the end of the table. "Mom," she said finally, "why don't you tell everyone how you're ready to sign the house over? Let's put the rumors to rest." The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. I folded my napkin carefully, my voice calm. "Yes, everything will be taken care of." Mark grinned, raising his glass. "See? She knows what's best." To the future, glasses clinked. Laughter filled the room, but across the table, Emily caught my eye. Her brows furrowed, confusion flickering in her gaze. I gave her the faintest shake of my head, a silent signal. "Not yet. Trust me." That night, after the guests left and the laughter faded, I crept into my study. I opened James's second envelope at last. Inside was a handwritten letter and a flash drive. "Linda," the letter read, "if you're reading this, it means they tried to take what's yours. The flash drive contains copies of every trust document, bank record, and deed transfer I ever filed. Keep it safe. If anyone challenges you, this will prove the truth. Do not show your hand too early. Let them think they've won until it's too late to back out." I clutched the letter, my eyes burning. James had seen it all before it even happened. He had left me the map. I slid the flash drive into my pocket and sat back in the chair, the hum of the refrigerator in the distance, the only sound. And then I began to plan. The next morning, I started small. I made an appointment with Mr. Reynolds, the lawyer, quietly updating him on everything. He looked at the documents, his old eyes widening. "Linda, you're untouchable," he said softly, "but if you want justice, you'll need patience." I nodded. Patience was something I'd spent a lifetime practicing. Back at home, I started gathering more. Every conversation Mark had, I noted. Every time Claire let a cruel word slip, I remembered. I even bought a small recorder, one of those cheap digital ones from Walmart, and kept it in my pocket whenever they came around. Because I knew the day was coming when I'd need proof, not just for myself, but for everyone watching. And the best revenge wouldn't be shouting or slamming my fist like Mark. It would be silence, patience, And then the truth unveiled so sharply it would cut him where it hurt most his pride. So I smiled when Mark called me a burden. I nodded when Claire told me I was lucky to have them taking over. I let them think I was weak, broken, resigned. But deep inside, with every document I held, every secret James had left me, I was building something. Something they'd never see coming. It happened on a Thursday. Claire called in the morning, her tone clipped, rehearsed. "Mom, she said Mark set up a family meeting tonight, 6 o'clock, at your house. The realtor will be here. And a notary. Just be ready. Be ready." The words coiled in my stomach like a snake. When I hung up, Emily, who'd overheard, rushed into the kitchen. "Grandma, don't do it." "You can't sign," I touched her cheek gently. "I won't. But they don't need to know that, not yet." Her brow furrowed. "You have a plan, don't you?" I smiled faintly. "Trust me." That evening, the house filled with people. Claire arrived first, dressed in a blazer as if she were running a board meeting. Mark swaggered in behind her carrying a leather folder and grinning like a man about to collect his winnings. The realtor, a polished young woman with bright lipstick, followed close behind, greeting everyone warmly but casting curious glances at me, the so-called seller. A notary, middle-aged briefcase in hand, sat up at the dining table. Mark clapped his hands together. "All right, everyone, let's get this over with. Linda, tonight's the night. You sign, we notarize, the realtor files the paperwork. Done deal." I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching them arrange my future as though I wasn't even there. The realtor slid glossy brochures across the table. "This house is a gold mine," she said cheerfully. "Developers will fight over it. You're looking at offers between $5.2 and $6.8 million. Mark whistled, smirking. "Told you, Linda. You've been sitting on a fortune you can't even use." Claire chimed in, her voice softer, but no less cutting. "Mom, this is good for you, too. You'll have money for care, for comfort. You won't have to worry anymore." "I'm not worried," I said quietly. They ignored me. The notary shuffled papers. "Let's begin. Mrs. Parker, I'll need your ID. Then we'll review the deed transfer documents." Emily burst into the room before I could move. "Stop! You can't make her do this." Claire snapped Emily enough. "Go upstairs! No!" Emily's voice cracked but carried like a shot. "She doesn't want this. You're forcing her." Mark rolled his eyes. "Teenagers, always dramatic." He turned to me, his grin sharp. "Linda, ignore her. Let's get this signed. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone, do you? Embarrass myself." The way he said it, like humiliation, was his favorite sport. I looked around the room, the realtor shifting uncomfortably, the notary waiting with his pen, Claire with her tight smile, Emily with her fists clenched, and Mark, arrogant, certain, already tasting victory. I let a long silence hang, the kind that makes people squirm. Then I reached for my purse. Slowly, deliberately, I set my ID on the table. Mark's grin widened. "That's it. That's my girl." But I didn't pick up the pen. I placed both hands flat on the table and said softly, "Before I sign anything, I want to say something." Mark sighed, exasperated. "Linda, this isn't story time. Just sign." "Listen to her," Emily snapped. The room froze. Even the realtor's eyes darted between us. I kept my voice calm, measured. "Do you know how many years I worked for this house? How many nights I sewed until my fingers bled so there'd be food on the table? How many times your father nearly collapsed from double shifts just to make sure we didn't lose it?" Claire's eyes flickered. The notary cleared his throat. "This house isn't just property," I continued. "It's my life. My husband's life. And you think you can waltz in here, wave some papers, and strip it away?" Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Stop making this dramatic. This is business. You're too old, too weak, too—" He stopped, realizing the realtor and notary were both staring at him, now their faces unsettled. I let the silence settle again, then whispered, "You'll get what's coming." Mark chuckled, trying to recover. "That's what I like to hear. A little cooperation. All right, let's sign." But inside, I wasn't cooperating. Inside, I was holding on to James's trust papers, the flash drive, the safety deposit key, all hidden, all waiting. I slid the pen closer. my fingers brushing it. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm. All right, let's see what happens. And at that moment, Emily caught my eye. She saw it, the tiny glimmer of steel in my gaze. She smiled faintly, like she knew the storm was coming. The notary leaned forward, pushing the documents toward me. "Sign here, Mrs. Parker." I rested the pen on the line, but didn't write. Instead, I lifted my eyes to Mark. And I smiled. Because soon, very soon, he would learn the truth. This house wasn't his to take. The pen hovered above the paper. Mark leaned in, his grin stretching wide. Claire held her breath. The realtor smoothed her skirt. The notary tapped his pen. Everyone in the room thought the same thing. The old woman is finally giving in. But I didn't sign. Instead, I set the pen down slowly and folded my hands. "No," I said, my voice steady. Mark froze. "What did you just say?" I said no. Claire's voice rose sharp with panic. "Mom, don't do this. You promised I never promised." I slid back my chair, standing tall, taller than I'd felt in years. My hands trembled, but not with fear. With fire. Mark's face twisted. "You think you can stop this? You're finished, Linda. You're weak, you're broke, and you've got nothing." I smiled. "That's what you think." From my purse, I pulled out the thick envelope James had left me, the one marked with his handwriting. I laid it on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the stunned silence. "What's this?" Mark scoffed. "Proof," I said. "Proof that this house was never yours to take. Proof that James thought of everything long before you ever showed up." The notary leaned forward. "Mrs. Parker." I opened the envelope, spreading the documents across the table. Legal seals, signatures, dates from decades ago. "This house is in a trust," I said clearly, my voice rising so everyone could hear. "An irrevocable trust that gives me full control until my death. No one can force me to sell. No one can take it from me. Not even you." Mark's smirk faltered. His eyes darted over the pages, searching for a loophole, a mistake. But there was none. "Mr. Reynolds," my lawyer stepped into the doorway then. I'd asked him to arrive quietly, just in case. He cleared his throat. "She's telling the truth. I drafted these documents with her late husband. This house belongs solely to Linda until the day she passes. Anyone attempting to transfer it without her consent is committing fraud." Gasps rippled across the room. The realtor's jaw dropped. The notary sat back in his chair, stunned. Mark's face turned crimson. "You can't. This can't." "It can," Reynolds said firmly. "And it does. Every attempt you've made to coerce her into signing is documented. And if she chooses, she can bring this to court. With witnesses." He nodded toward Emily. "With recordings." Mark's head snapped toward me. "Recordings." I reached into my sweater pocket and pulled out the small recorder I'd bought at Walmart. I pressed play. Mark's own voice filled the room, harsh and loud. "You're a parasite. You've outlived your usefulness. Sign it or we'll put you in a nursing home." The room went deathly still. Claire's face drained of color. The realtor's lips parted. The notary glanced at me with something like respect. Emily grinned, her eyes blazing with triumph. Mark lunged for the recorder, but I snatched it back. "Touch it, and I'll have you arrested for assault," I said calmly. He froze. I leaned forward, my voice like steel. "You thought I was weak. You thought I was fragile. But I've survived worse men than you. And unlike you, I keep my promises. I promised James I would never let anyone take this house. And I intend to keep that promise." Mark's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. For the first time, he looked small. Claire whispered, "Mom, I didn't know." "Yes, you did. I cut her off. You stood by and let him humiliate me in public. You let him call me names. You watched him steal my keys, parade me like a burden in front of strangers. You knew." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't soften. "Not now." Mr. Reynolds gathered the documents, tapping them neatly. "This meeting is over. If you push this any further, I'll file charges for elder abuse and attempted fraud. And trust me, I'll win." The realtor rose awkwardly, clearing her throat. I wasn't aware of this. Clearly this isn't a valid transaction. I'll withdraw immediately." She hurried out the door. The notary snapped his briefcase shut. "I can't witness something illegal." "Good evening." He left without another word. Now it was just the four of us, me, Emily, Claire, and Mark. Mark's face burned with rage. "You think this is over? You think you've beaten me?" I smiled faintly. "I don't think it. I know it." Emily slipped her arm around me, her voice fierce. "Grandma doesn't need you. She never did." Mark's chest heaved, but for once he had no comeback. Claire whispered, "Mom." I raised a hand. "Don't. Not tonight. You chose your side." She dropped her gaze, shame flooding her face. I gathered the documents, sliding them back into the envelope. My voice was calm but sharp as glass. "You wanted this house so badly. You bragged, you humiliated me, you tried to strip me of dignity. But you'll never live here. Not now. Not ever." The silence was thick, broken only by the clock ticking on the wall. And in that silence, I saw it the moment Mark realized his empire of arrogance had crumbled. The house wasn't his. It never would be. For a long moment after the documents hit the table, no one spoke. The clock ticked in the hallway. Emily's arm was firm around my shoulder. Mark was the first to move. He shoved back his chair so hard it scraped against the floor. "This is a trick," he snarled. "Some cheap stunt. You think a piece of paper and an old man's signature changes anything? That house should be ours." "It isn't," Mr. Reynolds said calmly. "And unless you want to see the inside of a courtroom for elder abuse and fraud, you'll leave right now." Mark's face flushed red, his fists clenched, but there was nothing he could do. The notary was gone. The realtor had fled. His so-called victory had evaporated into thin air. "You humiliated me," he spat at me, his voice shaking. "You made me look like a fool in front of everyone." I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded calmly. "No, Mark. You did that all by yourself." Emily's laughter burst out short and sharp. "Grandma doesn't need to humiliate you. You've been doing it since the day you walked in here." Claire flinched, covering her face with her hands. She hadn't said a word since I cut her off. Now she whispered, "Mark, please, stop." But Mark couldn't stop. He wasn't capable. He grabbed the leather folder he'd brought, stuffed with his fake documents, and threw it across the table. Papers scattered like dead leaves. "You think you've won, Linda? You think you've beaten me?" I stood slow but steady and looked him dead in the eye. "I don't think. I know." His lips curled back, but there was no more fight in him. He stormed toward the door, slamming it behind him so hard the walls rattled. For a moment, only the echo of his anger remained. Then the silence wrapped around us like a blanket. Claire stayed seated, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mom, I didn't know he'd go this far. I thought—" "You thought wrong," I said flatly. "You thought money mattered more than respect, more than family." She sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking. "I made a mistake." Emily crossed her arms. "A mistake. You let him steal Grandma's keys. You stood there while he called her useless in front of everyone. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's choosing his side." Claire buried her face in her hands. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decades settle over me. My voice was calm, but it cut through the room like glass. "I raised you better than this, Claire. I sacrificed for you, and you threw it all away for greed." She lifted her tear-streaked face. "Mom, please, forgive me." I looked at her for a long time. Part of me wanted to soften, but another part remembered the laughter at the diner, the stolen keys, the humiliation in front of strangers. Forgiveness would not come tonight. "Forgiveness isn't free," I said finally. "You'll have to earn it. And I don't know if you ever will." Claire's sobs broke the silence again. Emily wrapped her arms around me, fierce and protective. By the next day, the story had already spread. The waitress from Miller's Diner told the whole town how Mark had humiliated me, only to be exposed. Neighbors whispered on porches, shaking their heads. The man in the red flannel told anyone who'd listen, "That woman's tougher than steel." She put them in their place. And suddenly, the shame wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. Mark tried to salvage his pride. He stormed into the diner a week later, boasting that he and Claire were reconsidering their options. But the looks he got told a different story. Customers turned their backs. Someone muttered, "That's the one who tried to steal from his mother-in-law." The waitress refused to serve him. Claire stopped going out altogether. The shame clung to her like a second skin. And me, for the first time in months, I felt peace. Emily and I sat on the porch one evening watching the sun dip behind the houses. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue from a neighbor's yard. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You showed them, Grandma," she whispered. I smiled faintly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting. It's standing tall and letting the truth speak. She squeezed my hand. "I want to be like you when I grow up." My throat tightened. "Just promise me one thing, Emily." "What's that?" "Never let anyone make you feel small. Not your husband, not your friends, not even your family. Respect is earned, not demanded." She nodded solemnly. Inside, Claire's sobs echoed faintly through the house. She had chosen wrong, and now she was paying the price. Mark was gone. His pride shattered his reputation in pieces. And Claire, well, her punishment was living with what she had done. For me, justice wasn't a gavel banging in a courtroom. It was this: the dignity restored, the whispers of respect in the community, the knowledge that I had kept James's promise. And most of all, the look in Emily's eyes, pride, not pity. That was worth more than any fortune. The house was quiet again. No realtors, no notaries, no lawyers, just me, Emily, and the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. For days, Claire stayed upstairs, the sound of her muffled crying drifting through the vents. Mark didn't return. He couldn't. Not after what happened. The community had turned against him. He was a man without a reputation, and he knew it. One evening, I brewed tea and carried 2 cups onto the porch. Emily joined me, her hair pulled back, her eyes bright. She had become my shadow, through it all my strength, when mine threatened to falter. We sat together listening to the crickets. The air smelled of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you ever wish you'd just given it to them? Signed and been done with it?" I smiled faintly, shaking my head. Giving them the house wouldn't have ended anything. They would have taken my dignity, too, and that Emily is worth more than money. She sipped her tea, considering that. "I guess I don't understand how they could treat you that way. You're their family." I let out a long breath. Greed blinds people. It makes them forget where they came from. It makes them forget who held them when they were sick, who worked nights to pay their bills, who built the roof over their head. To them, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was an obstacle standing between them and a fortune. Her hand slipped into mine. "But you showed them." I nodded slowly. "I didn't do it for me alone. I did it for your grandfather. For every night he came home with his back breaking from double shifts. For every stitch I sewed to pay a bill. For every sacrifice we made so Claire could have a better life. I wasn't about to let all of that be reduced to a dollar sign." We sat in silence for a moment. A breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Then Emily asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So what happens now?" I looked out at the neighborhood, at the homes that had risen in value over the years, at the lives built on foundations like ours. "Now," I said quietly, "I live. I drink my tea. I tend my garden. I laugh with you. And I guard this house not because it's worth $5 million, but because it's worth every moment of the life we poured into it." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "You're stronger than anyone I know." I pressed a kiss to her hair. "Strength isn't about shouting or fighting, Emily. It's about standing when they expect you to fall. It's about knowing who you are when others try to tell you you're nothing." Inside, I heard Claire's footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't expect you to forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I want you to know. I see it now. I see everything you did for me, and I'm ashamed." I looked at her for a long time. For once, I didn't feel the sting of betrayal. I just felt tired. "You'll have to live with that shame," I said softly. "And maybe if you learn from it one day, you'll understand the value of respect. Not money. Respect." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she nodded and disappeared back inside. Emily squeezed my hand. "You don't need her apology, do you?" I shook my head. "I don't need their approval. I don't need their pity. All I've ever needed is dignity, and I have it." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth against my face. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt truly at peace. I thought of James. I imagined him sitting beside me, his rough hand over mine, his voice in my ear. "Steel in your spine, Linda." I smiled. "I kept my promise," I whispered to the air. "No one pushed me out. This house is still ours." Emily tilted her head. "What did you say, Grandma?" I opened my eyes and looked at her, at the future shining in her gaze. I said I told her firmly, never let anyone take away your worth. Houses can be stolen. Money can vanish. But dignity that belongs to you alone, guard it. She nodded, her eyes wide with understanding. And with that, I sat back in my chair, sipping my tea as the night settled in the house, standing strong behind me. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I had respect, and that was enough.